So you're in Wyoming, right? Or did you already take off?
I'm to my destination now.
So where are you at for a while?
Minnesota.
What are you doing out there?
Doing some prescribed burning.
Right on. Before the big fire season hit.
It's already hit the south and the southwest.
Yeah.
Buddy and I were talking about that before we started.
Right on.
But anyways,
Should
figured
we introduce who we got again?
Again,
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
return guest on the W Hunting Supply podcast.
Yeah.
How do you
Appreciate
say
guys.
your name?
Stephan Roaque.
Okay.
Jason Doobie. No.
Please report to the principal's office.
Right? Oh, man.
I feel like that lately.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll just go over the intros again for those that weren't able to listen in on the weather podcast that I did.
Which episode was that?
I'll look it up. It's been a minute.
It has.
We should be more prepared.
I have.
That's not our style.
Well, I've had hounds since 2002, and really not just in hounds and hunting period. I've been a self-taught hunter. I've had to learn the hard way through the school of hard knocks. I've had all kinds of dogs through the years, and ultimately have landed on a line of dogs that fits my style.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had, just like anybody else that has done it the way that I have, and I haven't had any mentors at all. I have sat behind and kind of learned and took pieces and parts from some really well-known houndsmen and also some other guys too that are not well-known. And so, I've, like I said on the last podcast, I've been in fire for 11, 12 seasons now. So we get run through a rigorous amount of training, both, like I said in the last one, some weather classes, and just a little blurb, a correction. I made a mistake last time. It is S290, not L290, and that's the intermediate weather class that we go through and whatnot. But we get ran through a lot of leadership seminars and classes.
You had one that you sent us.
Mm-hmm.
Who was
that was a good one.
Yeah, that's Gordan Graham. And those that have, in the fire side, those that know about Gordan Graham and his little YouTube video that he does about high risk, low frequency, they already know what I'm talking about. You guys know what I'm talking about offhand already. And to kind of paint the picture for the listeners, think of a square, and you put that square.
Well, before we get into that, I mean, like if somebody's wanting to go watch that video, which is probably because that's my biggest concern about trying to do this podcast, is it's going to be a really to do this over audio is going to be kind of difficult.
It's tough.
I mean, that's my number one concern is trying to explain what he mentioned over a podcast. I think could be difficult. So if somebody was wanting to stop right now and they could YouTube something, what should they YouTube to watch this?
We'll put it in the link notes too.
Put a link.
Put the link in the show notes.
Okay.
So hit pause right now. Go down and click on the first video link in the episode notes.
Yeah, and that's going to be who?
Gordan Graham, and you can go to YouTube and type in Gordan Graham, and it'll be high risk, low frequency.
Yeah,
it'll be kind of an older video, and he was a little bit younger than now. He goes and talks about
and like, most of what he's talking about is like fire and police activity.
Yeah.
So first responders is what he's talking about whenever he says high risk, low frequency. Essentially, what I got out of that was there's situations, but basically, when you have a really high risk situation that doesn't happen very often, that's when the problems are kind of a big deal, I guess.
Correct. And so, with the first responders and what we do, we're thrown into a lot of events and activities where we have to be critical thinkers. We have to be thinking on our feet. We have to be problem solvers. And really, like I told Jason, just because he's pertaining to first responders does not mean that you cannot take home something from that video and apply it to your personal life. I do that all the time, and especially when I'm running dogs, training dogs, and in that aspect as well. You will take something away from it.
Yeah,
It gives
and
more perspective.
I do that, and I've never watched that video, but what I took away was I absolutely do that. And a good example of that would be when we have a problem. You know what I mean? So if somebody calls and let's say, they ordered pink collars and we shipped them a green collar. You know what I mean? They call us all mad or whatever, or maybe not even mad, but just, hey, you shipped me green collars. I actually ordered pink collars. And so somebody takes the phone call, and that doesn't happen very often. You know what I mean? So, but what I tell people is you get off the phone and you fix that problem. Like, you go attack that problem, because that problem will fester itself later. If you get to the end of the day and then forget, and then the next day you forget, and now that customer could be really upset because he called, and you could take it one step further. Pink collar and green collar is not a really good example, but let's say a good example is Jason. I'll give you a good example.
I want to hear this.
So we double check all our orders, right, Stephan?
Allegedly.
Supposed to. The reason for that is to try to eliminate problems. So we try to have two hands on every order. And we had a customer that a package got lost, and so it took him a long time to get his package. By an extra week or two. Then when he got it, he had happened to ordered a 2-dog alpha system, and when he opened the box up, he just got a collar. So somehow we completely effed up. I mean, like, did not ship him his Alpha 200. And after 2 weeks of trying to like, oh no, it's the mail, we can't, like, whatever. And that was what would you call, high risk, low frequency? If that happened too often, we wouldn't have a business. We would have. So I actually came in on my weekend to fix that problem, because I was like, I need to get this problem resolved now, because I don't want to accidentally forget on Monday morning or whatever. And so that'd be a really good example of something that doesn't happen very often, but that was a really high risk situation. This guy, so when I was watching the video, that's kind of one of the things I took away from it. Is in my business, I try to do that, and I encourage my employees to do that. They're like, if there's a problem, go fix that. Get that problem out of the way, because that'll bite you later.
Yeah. Here's another analogy that I talked with Jason about that every houndsman that can relate to. Let's just say, buddy, you and I, we cat hunt, and I'm sure Jason dabbles in a little bit too. So we cat hunt, right? And we kind of, through social media or through friends of a friend or whatever, we get invited to go bear hunting. Okay. And we go out and we take our cat dogs out. We tie in, and the guy that we're with, his dogs rig a bear. Okay. What are the things just off of the top of your guys' head that you can think of? Well, as soon as we're driving down the road and the dogs blow up, what is going on? Okay. What? Dogs are excited. You're excited. The other hunters.
I'm mad. My dogs
Buddy's
are
pissed.
Hey.
He's getting the shocker out.
What are my because let's just clarify. What are my dogs doing right now? Are they in the box looking around, or are they wanting to go?
Hypothetically speaking, you want to chase a bear in this, buddy.
So yeah, this is like the ideal situation you pull up to. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
a lot is happening.
Right.
And if you're caught up in the moment, you're jumping out, you're trying to call our dogs up, and you're throwing all the dogs in, his dogs, your dogs, everybody's going in. Okay. This is what would be called a high risk, low frequency event, because you don't do this. You're just used to cat hunting. You get thrown into this situation. There's a ton of emotions running with this, not including your dogs don't know his dogs. So there's going to be some type of element related to that. Some dogs, not all that I've seen, can just jump in, no problems there, and they just fall into the pack and there's no issues.
Yeah.
Some dogs, and it's to be expected, their performance is either going to drop completely out for a couple days, or they're not going to be performing, is what I'm getting at, as they would in a situation that you do all the time.
Yeah.
And so the whole point behind this podcast today is to kind of bring to light you're being mentally disciplined and know what to expect. When I dump my dogs out in that situation, I know fully well I'm running in my mind all the type of scenarios that could happen. What am I going to do? What are my expectations? My expectations going to be up high? Probably not, and they shouldn't be, because all that's going to bring is frustration.
Yeah.
See, and that's kind of where I took, or what I took away from it when you first shared with me, is it was our emotions run high, or a lot of guys, they hang their hats on their dog. I mean, really, that's a big burden, but we do. And the area that you can get most upset and they're going to look the worst are those high risk, low frequency events.
Mm-hmm.
We all have them. And it's just, that's when I go back and think about it, those are the times where I have to keep myself in check and be honest about what's happening with the dogs, and, cut slack where it's needed and hold their feet to the fire where it's also needed.
Yeah, exactly. And, speaking from experience, that's when I was younger, and I sometimes do it from time to time now, but I'm more mindful of it, so I catch myself. But when I was younger, boy, man, I would really get upset and be like, what the heck is going on? Why the hell is this not working? Like,
Yeah.
they should, as soon as we get out, like, cause I've played competitive rugby for 17 years now. And my expectation is when I step out of the truck, whether we're free casting or I'm dumping out of a track, it is no BS. It's business. We are rolling. And it took me a long time. And even today, I'm still learning. They're just dogs.
Yeah.
Dogs do dog things, and knowing those situations, you know, knowing how to work with your dogs, knowing what they're going to do in those situations.
And I think the high risk term. When I think about it, I'm like, yeah, what is it really high risk? I don't know. Like there are times when it's high risk, but just to stay. I understand the low frequency. If I'm going to go turn dogs loose, and I guess the expectations I get. I don't know that I would consider that a high risk situation. There'd be some situations that may be high risk if you're.
Well, you're talking safety risk, right? But I mean, like,
Well,
it's the highest risk of something to go awry over your
Yes.
day-to-day program.
Yes, that's
how I
the
kind of take
concept.
it.
Yep. Not necessarily things that could go wrong. I mean, I'm sure there's stories out there floating around where guys can tell a story of something that actually did go wrong in that high risk category.
Well, I guess
yeah.
the question would be if it was really high risk for me. So in some situations I could think of that would be high risk would be if you got a client, if you're guiding and you got a client there, and you got a really nice cougar, Tom Cougar track that you've been chasing for a while, and you got a good track. That's probably not the time to turn loose with new dogs, or what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, let's just dump everybody together and try it out. If you really gotta,
You got to focus.
you gotta provide. I mean, if you wanna be successful, I can see where that's that would be a high risk, low situation. You know what I mean? Like, okay, we don't do that. We don't turn dogs loose very often, very, very much, and we need success in catching this particular cat. I can see that being a high risk thing. Just saying we're going to go out, going to go hunt. I'm like, man, is that really a high risk situation? That would be just a low risk, and I guess that's where you kind of got to tie it into. There's 4 quadrants to your thinking, right? The way they explain this is there's 4 major categories that situations will be put into. So let's talk about that, because we talked about the high risk, low frequency, but let's back it up now that we kind of talked a little bit about it, and let's talk about all the 4 categories.
Okay, so those 4 categories, those quadrants, whatever, however you want to call it, if I remember it right, and you'll have to forgive me because I've been on the
Because
road the
he's
past
doing this
couple
out of his
days.
car.
But anyways, so that upper left corner is going to be your high risk, low frequency.
So if you take just draw an
No,
X. If you draw an X, like a
Mhm.
quadrant. So you got a big X, and that makes 4 sections. If you do a square
Correct.
and you draw an X in the middle of it, you got 4 parts of that square. So the upper left hand corner would be, what's that? So
Upper left would be high risk, low frequency. And then the upper right would be high risk, high frequency. And then the lower left would be low risk, low frequency. And then that bottom right would be, can't think of it right now off the
High
top of my
risk,
head.
low frequency. Or
That,
yeah. So
the,
see, you're already confusing me.
yeah.
This is where they need the picture. Hopefully,
Basically,
they watch
it's stuff that normally happens.
If you
low
watch
risk.
the video, when we told you to go back and watch the
Yeah,
video,
but-
you wouldn't be confused right now because you know what we're talking about. If you didn't, which
most of you didn't.
most of you guys didn't listen, I can tell you that right now. Now you're like, wow, my head's hurting. But basically, there's high and low risk. So there's situations that have high and low risk, right? Essentially, and then there's, when we say high frequencies, there's things you do very often and there's things you don't do very often. So
correct.
everything that we do, it doesn't matter what it is. Either there's a lot of risk for it or there's not a lot of risk for it. And either we do it a lot or we don't do it a lot. And so, I guess a good, what would be a good example for a low risk, something that doesn't really matter that we do a lot?
Let's just say go conditioning your dogs.
Right.
Okay, roading your dogs or doing some type of very simple, easy stuff with your dogs. You could be handling your dogs. You could be roading your dogs, that kind of thing. That's everyday things. Even in your personal life, you get up, you make coffee every day.
Yeah.
That's a low frequency.
If you mess it
type
up,
deal.
if you mess up that situation, so like
No
you
big
don't
deal.
road your dogs enough, or you rode them maybe a little too much, it's not the end of the world if something goes wrong, right? Yeah, you screwed up that situation, but you're going to be doing it again tomorrow, so we can fix it tomorrow. That would be a good example.
Here's another analogy that that helps dumb it down a little bit. And it's,
Perfect.
James Reason was I think he was a British scientist. He came up with this analogy, the Swiss cheese model effect. Okay, we all know what Swiss cheese looks like, and in that analogy he uses, anything that can go wrong will go wrong.
That's Murphy, I think.
Yeah, Murphy.
Well,
they're brothers.
I mean,
he stole
They're
it from him.
Yeah, they're homies. But essentially,
they're homies.
Yeah, it is Murphy, but it ties together, right? It makes sense. And once you fall once those holes line up, it's just it's an avalanche effect. Again, a very simple analogy. You forgot to put coffee in the pot in the morning. You get up in the morning, you're grabbing your stuff. Shit, now I don't have coffee. Hopefully the gas station does.
Right.
You roll into the gas station. Nowadays they find it's hard to find help. Gas stations closed. Now what? Some guys really thrive off of coffee or whatever it may be. And so now your day is now set up for, and anything that can happen will happen. So the question I'm going to ask you and the audience to think about, it's a rhetorical question. How are you going to get out of those situations? Be problem solvers, be proactive, not reactive. There's time and place to be reactive, but how are you going to get out of certain situations to problem solve? And the reason I ask that is because listen, we're all trainers. Just because we don't take in dogs, and that is our business. I am not knocking professional trainers at all. In fact, they have it down pat, I believe, better than most of us. But we are all trainers in our own aspect, right?
Yeah.
We have to learn to problem solve our dogs, pups, young dogs, whatever, in the best way possible. And as just like all mammals, there's a fight or flight side. Okay, if you stay within, let's just say it's a swinging pendulum. It swings right, it's fight. Swing left, it's flight. If you start getting upset, you're on that fight side, and then if you're too cautious, you're on the flight side. So if you stay in that middle of the swinging pendulum, you're able to think more clear. You're able to think about things clearly, and really kind of be a common sense critical thinker. I understand that not everybody is that way, but it sure as hell makes your life 10 times easier if you try to be mentally disciplined and go down that path.
Yeah.
And really what Gordy Graham is talking about, that's essentially what he's, in short, dumbing it down, that's what he's talking about. How do you
Keeping a
get
cool
yourself out of
head.
it? Yeah. Stay calm, cool, so the dogs are dogs that day and you trash out. Yeah, it's a little aggravating, but oh well. It's time on to the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I kind of took more away from it was to identify the problems that you need to tackle. Meaning, that there's times to if we were just talking about dogs, you know what I mean? Like, okay, a young pup in training, you have a lot of I guess you call it low risk situations where it's like, yeah, you don't need to go completely, I guess trash breaking or whatever. You know what I mean? There's just a lot of opportunities to correct problems. You know what I mean? It's not you have to correct that problem right away, quickly, fastly, or you're never going to get that opportunity again because there's a lot of opportunities to fix a young dog. It's like, hey, chill out a little bit. And just learning those opportunities that, or having the confidence to know, hey, this is something that's going to happen a lot. I don't need to correct it or fix this problem on the very first attempt. This is something that may take weeks or days or weeks or whatever to get this, activity planned or whatever. But learning to identify the situations is like, this does not happen very often. Let's just say a porcupine or whatever. And learning that, hey, this is the opportunity that there's a high risk. You know what I mean? So number one, it doesn't happen very often. You don't run across a porcupine very often. And
it
number
sucks.
two, that it sucks when you do if you don't have a dog that's trained. And so that's a good, situation where it's like you might want to take your time and leverage that situation because it doesn't happen very often and there's a high risk of ignoring it. You know what I mean? Just bragging about how your dog won't mess with a porcupine and driving on past it may not be a solid choice later in life.
Yep.
That's a great way to put it, buddy. Folks that are kind of still trying to come out of what we just went through that are confused. Your high risk events are the events that are rare.
Yeah.
Your high frequency events are things that are high intensity that happen all the time. Okay?
And I might cut in there. Like, I would say even just my hunting situation is an example. Same ground, same conditions for the most part, same dogs. It's a high frequency, but low risk because it's something that just happens every time. You know? I'm trying to put it in houndsman terms. Like, I don't know if that helps or not, but.
And if folks having trouble kind of grasping it, my advice is just fall back to the Swiss cheese model analogy. That is the way to think about things. Jared gets
so you
on
got to
here
explain
a lot.
that again. You lost me on the Swiss cheese model.
Okay, so
let's go back on it.
Murphy's Law.
Yeah, I know Murphy's Law. Yeah.
So again, everybody knows what Swiss cheese looks like. They have multiple holes in a slice.
Yep.
Once you get multiple slices lined up, okay, and if you get those holes to line up perfectly, just like Newton's law, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. It's a chain reaction. Okay, so you choose to just say the hell with it. I'm not going with coffee today, and we're just gonna see how this day goes. And then you cut a track, you dump out, and then the dogs start doing something weird, not what you're expecting. They start trashing or whatever's going on, and it just you've slid into, let's say, for the sake of conversation, 3 or 4 slices of Swiss cheese. Now anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and now your day is starting to
You're
tank.
shot.
Yeah.
And for some guys, it's just like, that's it, I'm done. And on the extreme side, um, guys that have had this happen and it stays lined up, and these slices keep lining up and I'm speaking on the extreme side, like I said, that'll ultimately lead to them just saying, I'm done with this. I am
Yep.
so done with this. I'm done with dogs. The hell with this. Like, and you could really back up, and I'm not going to get in the weeds about it, of why those happened, right?
Right.
It could be from like, man, I have just struggled since I started, and I just never caught a break, and I can't figure this out, and that's what's happening. That is
Yeah.
that essentially that is what happened, and I feel bad for those guys and gals too. I really do. But the purpose of the podcast and my intent today is to bring to light, just like you guys said, you've thought about this kind of stuff, but you haven't really connected it per se.
So, yeah, maybe I'm starting to pick up a little bit of crumbs, a little cheese crumbs here, trying to understand this. But so I guess what the question for me would be is, if you're saying the cheese slices line up, a guy would want to be willing to be like, hey, like let's go find a different block of cheese.
Twist that cheese.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Turn the cheese.
Well, I think
in the situation, I would think it'd be like, okay, that's whatever. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to load all my dogs up. I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to go regroup somewhere else. You know what I mean? If something's going wrong with the dogs or whatever, or in some situations, maybe I'll have a pup that's just not going. You know what I mean? Like all the dogs are starting to go, that pup is just sitting on the road licking my feet or whatever it is the dog's doing, and I'll just be like, yep, I'll put that dog in the box and close it up and be like,
Yep.
that's a reset for that dog. You know what I mean? Like I don't keep pushing forward or whatever. And so maybe if all the dogs, I would do that where I would change locations or go to a different spot or just go do something different, I guess. If I don't know if that's what you're trying to say or something.
Yeah. Just kind of not really accept defeat, kind of
how are you
accept.
going to change?
Yeah, except it is what it is. Tomorrow's another day type thing. If you've just tried all day or whatever. Here's a solution. Since we're talking about the coffee thing, and the reason I stick on the coffee thing is because a lot of guys I know and I hunt with drink, coffee. If something were like that were to happen, get a jet boil. There's instant coffee. I mean, Black Rifle coffee company makes coffee bags or something. Like, if something like that were to happen, your day could turn around by just saying, oh dude, I've totally forgot I had a jet boil. I can make myself some coffee. I could still
Right.
this day could still be good.
And you mentally salvage that day.
Exactly. And so now you got your coffee, you're a happy dude or gal, and now we can go on with the day. That's an example of being, having a solution.
Yeah. Interesting.
Um,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so I want to wrap this back to that's the Swiss cheese model. Like we got kind of two topics going here, but when we're talking, I want to finish out this high frequency, low frequency, high risk, and kind of retouch back on that so we can. Did we ever fulfill that? Like, give an example of a. And I know we touched on the two, which is high frequency, happens a lot, low risk, and we talked on the big one, which is to watch out for, which is it has a high risk. We don't do it very often, but the other two would be what quadrants will we do there, and what
Low risk, low frequency.
yeah, low risk, low frequency. That would be a good one. Let's touch on that topic for a second.
So your low risk, low frequency. Okay, your low risk is going to be, I call it like your everyday stuff. Okay, buddy, you have a routine. And I only know this through listening to the podcast. You
Uh-oh.
know,
He's
you
a
know.
stalker, but he's famous now.
I need your autograph. I'm just kidding.
I can only give so many autographs out a day.
Yeah, he's met his quota for the day.
So let me ask you this, buddy. You hunt cats, and you know exactly where certain cats like to cross, right? And where, let's just say, where they like to kind of general area tree. I know, Jason, you were talking about this too. So let's just say it's a normal bobcat season. Okay, your low risk, low frequency days are going to be those. It's just things you do all the time. It's nothing. You know where to look. You know what's going on, and
Right.
everything flows. There's very little issues, that kind of thing. Um, to bring this around, I just thought of another high risk, low frequency event would be you turn out on a lion, and you didn't know that another hunter had turned out, or let's say free casted. They ended up trailing the same lion, and you guys get to the tree, and there's a big argument.
Right.
Okay, that would be I'm sorry, that would be a high risk, high frequency event, right? So
Well,
not
that'd be
high
a
risk,
low
low frequency.
frequency, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean you could go about it either way, because you two are doing the same thing that you guys do every day,
And it
you
just
know,
happens to end in an.
and it happens to end on a high risk event.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And you guys are just, I mean, it's just not a good situation.
Yeah.
And so that would be that, a high risk, high frequency is,
Well,
throwing that in on top of the dogs fighting at the tree.
well, the
Yeah.
high frequency is you know what you're doing. You've done that before.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like you're ready for that. Like if you're turning loose with dogs, like so the high frequency is you've done that over and over and over again. So it's not like, oh, this happened just once in a blue moon. It's like that is something that you're prepared for. You're ready for that already. So you were half expecting that situation. So you know you got to run your ass in there, and you know exactly what you need to try and do. You know what I mean? So yeah, it would be essentially you'd classify that as a high frequency, because it's like, yeah, hopefully you've been to a couple trees by then. If you're turning loose,
Hopefully.
maybe a tree is a low frequency.
Hey,
event
don't
for
be
you.
beating on people.
But you know what I mean? That's kind of the mythology is okay, you can't assume everything is a low frequency, because there are things you just do a lot, and those are the things that are trained for most of the time when you're talking to this guy. It's like, hey, there's high risk situations that we deal with all the time. Like there's a lot of high risk situations that we deal with.
But we know
But we
how
deal
to
with
deal
them.
with
We
them.
know how to deal with them. We expect them. We train for them.
We've learned.
It's not like, oh my gosh, this is, it's only, I won't say only, but the situations that are low frequency, those are the things you don't expect. You know what I mean? Those are the things that it's like, okay, we don't train for those. We don't, if you're not prepared mentally for them, or at least to identify that this is one of those situations. It's like, this is a situation that doesn't happen very often, and there's a really high risk for problems. Those are what in that video. That's what he was talking about when you're watching. It's like, hey, it's not just, oh, everything, it's a high risk. It's like you got to pull out the books and be like, okay, whoa, we got a high risk situation here. Let's stop the train. No, that's not what he's saying. He's like, man, like, you know what you're doing. You deal with high risk situations all the time. You get in your car and the light turns yellow. That's a high risk situation. But we've done it every day. We just know, easily hit the brakes, check, whatever. Light turns green. Again, it's high risk situation. Cars could still be flying through. Somebody run out the red light. That's a really high. When you're the first car in the light, that's a really high risk situation.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? We do that every day. Like, you're going to go through. I'm going to go through 6, 7 lights a day, and I'm going to go through that situation. So it's like, yeah, that's a high risk. I could die, but I do it all the time, so I'm really prepared for it. I know what to look. I check both directions before I cross the street, this type of stuff. So
Yes.
That's kind of, to sum up and tie back. It's like, what are we talking about this stuff? It's like, no, it's the things that don't happen very often, that you're just like going along your day, and then all of a sudden it's like porcupine jumps out of the woods and jumps on your dog. That's
the
one
stuff
that
you
you're
wouldn't
like, whoa.
imagine, the stuff you can't make up, and it just happens.
Right.
You're not prepared for it. You don't train for those situations.
Well, and it's
Exactly.
the most volatile of situations too. Like that's a scary place to be because sometimes it can be like legitimately risky, hunting different ground that you've never hunted and that sort of thing. But it's I don't know. I pick up what you're saying, buddy. Like it's kind of making more sense.
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to sit here and go, okay, you can't identify every situation.
Nor should you do this to this extent while you're
Yeah.
in the situation, or you'll probably be dead.
No,
Right.
and my intent for the podcast today is to just bring this to light so that folks can get the wheels turning in their head, and learn to become problem solvers, learn how to, when they're presented with these events, to get out of them, and that kind of thing.
So to circle around, here'd be a really good one. And like I said, I didn't watch this, but I know as I think about these situations and what I do in a situation, when I call dogs back. So if I got to call them off of a track for some reason, I really analyze the situation and do I want to call them? Do I want to tone them? When do I want to tone them? When do I want to call them? And that would be one of those situations where naturally I didn't know, I didn't have a word for this, and now I may geek out, Stephan, and be like, this is one of them low risk, high risk, low. I might geek out a little bit now. I'll be like, hold on, baby. Talk to my wife. But I know that I am really careful when I want to call dogs back. Especially if they're by a road, if they're by private property, if I'm hunting, like I was hunting, had some wolves around one time, is because I know that I don't do that very often. So I don't call my dogs back a ton, when they're running a track. And what my risk is I don't want to scatter the dogs, meaning I got a pack, they stay well together as a pack. And my situation is I don't want to scatter the dogs till they can almost hear me, so I want to find that situation, so instead of just jumping off the deep end and start toning dogs or whatever, I'm looking at the situation going, let me think about how to do this, because I want to just take an extra step. Like some people get, they get anxious or whatever. And I'm like, let me just take I have a little bit of time to make a right decision.
Yeah.
And that decision may be, let me drive over to this other road here, and I'm going to try and call them out from that side. You know what I mean? Or whatever the situation is. But that would be one of those, when you were talking about this and relating it to dogs and stuff, I was trying to think, and I was like, that would be one of those situations that naturally I slow way down. I'm like, okay, I'm doing something that I don't do very often, and the risk of my dogs scattering and then trying to pick up scattered dogs that can't hear me. Maybe they're in the creek. Maybe, there's just different situations. But
where they're hearing echoes,
you know what I mean? And I'm like, man, I want to be careful in those situations. And that would be,
yes, especially with young dogs.
Right.
Especially, I've seen a lot of countless times. Another risk that I can think of since you brought this up was, I've a couple houndsmen that I used to hunt with. They would just they wouldn't even tone. The dogs just started out. They never checked the track, nothing, and they just zapped them.
Right.
And I asked the guy once. I said, "What'd you do that for?" And he goes, "Well, they're on deer." I said, "How do you know?" And he stopped and he's like, "Well, shit, I didn't think of that." And I'm not saying that to throw him under the bridge by any means. I'm not.
Yeah.
Because that's like, just like you, I think the same way. I'm like, nope. Before I go and screw something up and take 2 steps back on a young dog, I'm going to go check and make sure it is what it is.
Right. Yeah. It's
that
in those
makes
one
sense.
situations that, and I guess the general consensus would be, just take a step back, think about it. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean you still have to react, but just realize that this is a situation that doesn't happen very often, and there's a real risk of doing it wrong. You know what I mean? And causing damage. There's situations that don't happen very often, and it's not a big deal. You know what I mean? Like whatever you there's no risk to it. You know what I mean? Like dogs are in your truck and you forgot to charge your alpha. You know what I mean? That doesn't happen very often, but Your dogs are in your truck, no big deal. Plug your alpha in, charge it. Okay, you fixed it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's nothing you need to sit there and worry or stress about. It's the high risk situation, so that the dogs are not running, or you know what I mean. Like I said, calling dogs back is one of those things that I just don't do that very often. And when I do, I understand that dogs do stupid stuff. You know
They
what I mean?
do
Like,
dog stuff.
They do dog stuff. Dogs do dogs. I don't understand when, but if a lot of times if I can get close enough where I know they're heading that direction, so I'll let me go over that road where they can hear me really good, and then I can kind of stop them and they'll hear me, so they'll come out to me rather than 3 miles away where they just, it's like a little mini bomb, and everybody's probably watched it, try to call dogs back or get dogs back as they just blow up, and then you got dogs scattered all in the canyon, and sucks.
You learn this for a reason.
Yeah. Before we move on from this topic here, I want to ask you guys this question. As experienced houndsmen, and even for the listeners as well, I want to ask you all this question as well. What do you think the I would say maybe the top 2 reasons would be why an experienced houndsman would fall into that category of high risk, high frequency event?
Say that one more time.
So the block, okay, that far right block that we want to stay out of, the high risk, high frequency for experienced houndsmen. What do you think we do as trainers, as humans? What do you think the reason is why we end up in those situations sometimes?
Because we turn a dog loose damn near every day. Like we let go of our dog, and
right. So that would fall.
Expecting it to do. Yeah.
That would fall under complacency.
No. I think that's if we're talking high risk, high frequency, meaning every time you turn a dog loose, there's a high risk of something going wrong. Right.
So
it's just a risk. Inherent risk is you don't keep that dog on a leash. You can't do what we do and keep a dog on a leash.
Correct.
And yet we do it all the time, sometimes multiple times a day.
Right. So
that would be a high risk, high frequency situation.
Right. Okay. So if we're in the high risk, low frequency, if we become complacent, this day-to-day stuff, you're like, it's going to be a normal day. And then something happens. It's like, we've done this for years, and we think, we got it all figured out. Like, I got these dogs dialed. I know what they're going to do in this.
Yeah.
And then we become complacent, or, be it a bear come down out of the tree and fall out on us or a dog, or, I mean, you just draw the scenario up. What I'm getting at is don't become complacent.
Yeah.
Always stay on your feet, because you like it, and it always is with his dogs. Just when you think you're like, man, I think I've seen it all. I really do.
Yeah.
you turn the corner and you're like, nope, I haven't seen it all.
I didn't see that coming.
I think that's the part that, to grasp is the actions you're going through may be that high frequency, like you're used to it every time, but let's say ending up at a tree with another pack of dogs. Like, it's just that last part that it's like, high risk, low frequency. It just switched completely because our perspective of the situation is a lot different than the actual situation sometimes.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. So
I think that, that kind of like those are 2 good examples that we've covered on the, like, I like my high risk, high frequency. I think every time we turn a dog loose, there's a high risk of something going wrong. I mean,
absolutely.
For sure.
But we do it all the time.
I was listening to a podcast earlier today. I can't remember what it was, but some boys traveled out from West Virginia and went lion hunting in Arizona, and they turned out on a track, and they didn't know what it was. They ended up catching a javelina with their dogs. And anybody in the Southwest or wherever you hunt from or gone to that has javelina knows good and well they can be very hard on dogs. And it got my wheels thinking. I was like, gosh darn, that's one of those events again. And they didn't know. And it's just, how do you get yourself out of them? And that kind of thing. It's just an example, but gosh.
And I think for the biggest, for the user to take away, if we're gonna geek out is again. So if we go back to that chart, you got risk on one side and frequency on the other. So you got high and low risk. There's some things that we do have low risk. There's some things we do have high risk, and then there's some things that we do a lot, and there's some things that we don't do very often. And so if it's got low risk, we don't really care too much about that because it's like, okay, it's not a big deal. Like nothing bad's gonna happen when you have a low risk situation. Maybe your ego gets bruised. Maybe the pup takes an extra couple days to train. I mean, just there's not really much risk. So it's like you could almost eliminate half your tasks that are just low risk. You're like, yeah, we don't really care too much about low risk situations. If we're going to spend a lot of our energy into training, those are not the ones you want to be careful of. You still got to do things. You still got to do things right. And you got to be methodical about them. But in the grand scheme of things, and when you relate it to firefighters, police officers, and that type of training, their idea of risk is a little different than what we're talking about.
Right.
So you got to figure out how risk tolerant you are. There's people who are not very
Exactly.
risk tolerant. There's people who are a lot, who just handle risk a lot more. Take somebody to the casino and you'll find out quickly how risk tolerant they are just by how they play. It's just the way human nature is. Some people are like, nope, they lose $2 and they're like, I'm done. I don't like this. And there's other people that are going to the bank asking for loans, to try to play it all on black.
I just throw $20 out the window every time I drive by one. Call it good.
Yeah.
No, I think that's it. You summarized it pretty well.
From the training side, that's interesting because I would think like even within training, you have different risk levels. Like to me, trash breaking a dog and recall are two different.
But you got to look at it and go, okay, what? So the scale of risk is directly related to how much of a geek you want to be about your training, Bill. Like honestly, yes. How geeky do you want to get about your training, Jason?
Correct.
Because if you want to, if you're going to be a really finite or eccentric trainer, then you would categorize risk here where somebody else might be like, yeah, no, there. So I mean, talking about this is really dependent on the person. You know what I mean? Like we got to be careful because it's really it's just a matter of the trainer reflecting a little bit and going, man, I am really rigid in my training program. So they may, call things risky that I'm going to be like,
no big deal.
I'm still going hunting without coffee. You know what I mean? Like coffee's not going to ruin my day of hunting. I'm still going to go. I might be in a bad mood, but that's not going to stop. I'm not going to stop my day of hunting because of coffee. But there may be somebody else who doesn't, or a dog does something wrong or makes one mistake, or so continue on, Jason. But I think we got to be really clear that the level of if you want to geek out, man, you could geek out and try to explain a situation that somebody would be like, that's low risk, man. Who cares about that?
Yeah, and I think essentially a lot of this take-home stuff that we're talking about, that's what what you're talking about as well is everybody has a tolerant level, like you talked about, buddy. And if folks can understand where their tolerance is, then at that point you can kind of build yourself from there.
Yeah.
Now, be it from you're just starting out to your intermediate houndsman to even your advanced guys, you figure that out. And I truly think you can really gain some ground in changing things up in your training or fine tuning or whatever you want to do, however you want to call it. I mean, there's 100 ways to skin a cat and none of them's wrong.
Right.
But I think the take home is that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would think the first step you'd have to do is you'd have to really think about your risk level and whatever you want to apply this to, whether, if you want to apply it to dogs or, emergency services or whatever it is, in that situation, you'd want to just look at the scale and go, man, that is something I don't like. That's think of a couple high risk situations, whether it's dogs on a highway or falling out of a race or, getting on private property or whatever. There's just situations that you would be like, oh, that's what I don't like happening at all. And I want to avoid that happening. And then
again,
yeah. And then learning to identify those situations, go, okay, well, how often does it happen? And when can I make an effort to stop it? But anyways, before I cut you off, Jason, you were talking about training.
well, yeah, no, I skipped it, but going off of what you said, like that ties into that whole Murphy's Law and the Swiss cheese, though. It's like you've seen these situations go bad, right? So we know that's high risk and we don't like that. So we're trying to keep our dog off the private property, or we're going to keep them from going over this ridge line into the wilderness. But they're building blocks that have built to that point, right?
Yeah.
Like things have happened. The dogs went down this drainage, hooked a right, they went over this saddle and then started going out of the country. Okay, well, if you're in that same area, that game animal starts running the same way. Now it's become a little more frequent. You've been through this before, and you're already trying to figure out how to stop them from, going out into the wilderness or whatever. Yep. It's just, you start analyzing the pieces more instead of just the result. It's what did A, B, C, D, and E all add up to get us here. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
It's just how much do you want to dissect that? I mean, which we can drive ourselves crazy. Sometimes we do, just focusing on something that a lot of guys will just say, you're wasting your time. What are you even talking about? Yeah. But when you really get geeking out on it, it's each of those events actually carries a lot of weight.
And it does. And really, I just want folks, no matter what walk of life they are with their dogs or personal life or whatever they do, I want them to just think about it. Set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
An example recently with a couple podcasts that Jason did and Jared, and then you and our buddy and that other gentleman, forgive me, I forgot your name.
Don.
Don talked about puppies and stuff like that. I can think of plenty, with that Swiss cheese model, plenty of examples when I was younger, starting out. Like I just wanted hounds, and I went down the road of just throwing money at dogs because they look good, and a guy just talked them up real good, and it was like everything that went wrong, that could go wrong, went wrong. I spent so much money. My wife can attest to it. I don't know how.
Get her on here.
Yeah, and I had a rough patch for a long time, and I did not set myself up for success. Okay. And I was in a hurry to get going. I was just, it's just bad. So, my advice as well is for guys and gals listening, we all work, excuse me, we all work jobs. We bust our tail to save our money, to buy the gear that we need, to buy the dogs that we want. Make sure you are dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Tag along with somebody, go along, see how their style is, how their dog style is, how they hunt. Really make sure it is something you like. And here's the other thing too. You can develop your own style in the end. Set yourself some goals. Try to attain those goals, be it that they're realistic, and you can set yourself up for success.
Right.
A quote here: never let undue pressure influence your judgment or decisions. Avoid mistakes and don't hurry. Like I said, I was in a hurry to just start catching things, just start catching game, right?
Well, you and everybody else who started. I mean, really, we were all going to come in and take the world by storm, right? I mean,
well, yeah,
you're just going to get a dog and be in it.
Right. And I talk about myself before I can speak to others, because that's just how I go about life. I'd be hypocritical. I just that's how I am. And I just wanted to say that, those that are starting out having a rough time, you're not alone. We were all there at some point in time.
For sure.
Yeah.
So you guys got anything else?
No. Jason?
Well, I think that is my main ending takeaway here, is everybody that is still doing this has been through that stage. Even Buddy, I can't remember what episode it was, but somebody said something and you asked him, how old were you? Maybe it was the L-Wangers. I think it was with one of the
Yeah.
Ellwangers.
Yeah.
Because you guessed, like, as far as like the comment was made, you figured he was, in his late teens, early 20s, new to dogs. Because there's this mold, right? Stereotypes are there for a reason, usually. And it takes a long time, because I would say I was in the same category as you. Like, nothing lined up. There is one reason that I am still hunting dogs, and his name's Tony Witcherly. That is the only reason I'm still in it, the reason I started my business, or I would have walked a long time ago, because it was Murphy's Law. Getting wrong dogs, getting mixed influences, everything just kind of stacked up without even knowing it, because you don't have the knowledge to understand it at that point. So I would just encourage people, don't get discouraged. It's tough, and you have to analyze it and grow from it, but don't just throw in the towel if it's something that you really feel called to do either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my
like I said, I was
motivational
curious
speech.
if we were going to be able to. I mean, hopefully we didn't confuse too many people. I think it's a complex, it's a deep, I guess I'll say complex.
It's a deep dive.
It's a deep topic as far as in life in general. And there's a lot of things like I geek out about business or stuff like that, which, I related more to this topic, to the business side of things and how W has become successful, as far as what it does. And, even back whenever, Jason, when you joined us, it was like, there was a couple things I was like, Jason, we do it this way. This is why we do it this way. Bam, bam, bam. Because, these situations, just happen at different times. And I was like, having a process is really important. A whole part of the whole success of W is having a process to the madness. Like, there's things that we do. We want to make sure that we have this process. And so I wanted to make sure, I first reflected on my professional business stuff when we talked about this. And then you got to slow down. And again, you subject your risk, with the dog hunting. So my risk of business is a little bit higher. I'm less tolerant to risk in business. I make decisions about risk that are different, but the dog stuff, you got to look at a whole different level because it's a different page. But you were wanting to say something, Stephan.
No, you're onto something. You're on something, and one more thing I wanted to add in this podcast, and I'll talk quick on it. The key to understanding all of this is understanding the whys. Okay, from a beginning houndsman, houndswoman, whatever, ask those questions. Well, why did you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand it. You think about it. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you can, even for us experienced guys, I ask myself that question because we need to know our shit and what we're doing so we can be successful as well. And I said, well, why did I do that? Why did they do that? Well, they did that because of X, Y, Z. You gotta, it's really key to understanding the whys. It really is.
Yeah.
So, hey, I appreciate you guys working with me, and hopefully this is a good podcast and folks can take away something from it.
Yeah, I think it was good. I think it was a little different topic. We talked about hunting, but I mean, it's always interesting. We might have put some people to sleep on the road, but we came here. We accomplished our mission. I was like, and it was a little rough there in the beginning. I was like, this is gonna be a shitty podcast. Now we might have saved it. I think there was a couple parts there where we started spinning the mud, but yeah, I think we pulled it out.
Yeah, and to the listeners, that they're gonna put up that link. I encourage you to watch that video. Gordan Graham, he does a lot better job of explaining it. He'll make you laugh.
It's pretty funny. That's what I was gonna say. Like, he's actually a pretty funny dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, hey, I really do appreciate it. So thank you.
All right, Steph. Well, you say safe out on the fire. You got I don't know what the rest of the world's doing. We've got so much snowpack and so much rain in the last month over here. It's insane.
I don't know. The rest of it's on fire.
Yeah, everybody else is, but man, we got a ton of snowpack and we've been getting the highest rain we've had in a long time. So I'm not sure if it's just going to make a bunch of weeds grow taller before they dry out.
Yes, that's what we're worried about down here. Just gonna sprout and then die.
Yeah, it's like, oh, just grow it. It's going to make a big old pile of grass to
Tinderbox.
Yeah. So, you know.
Well, stay safe, man.
Will do.
If you end up out this way, look us up.
Yeah.
I will. Hope maybe if I do, maybe try and squeeze into the office.
Yeah.
There you
absolutely. All right.